student housing is such a unique industry. The more unique an industry is, the more important it is for that industry to have a resource and a platform to share ideas and data, to determine best practices, and a platform to simply promote networking among the professionals in that industry. That's what we are setting out to provide with Student Housing Insight. But what's even more unique about the student housing industry is how unique those professionals are. They want to make a positive impact on the students and the university communities they serve. They understand they have an opportunity to touch the future. They come to work every day looking for ways to make that future bright. If you're one of those people, come be a part of Student Housing Insight. Welcome, everybody. If you can, just let me know in the chat if you can hear me. Dave, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Let me get my presentation started here. Well, guys, we are starting right on time. Welcome to Shop Talk for February 9th. Appreciate everybody joining in and take a look at what we're talking about this week. We've got a lot of great topics on hand. Talking about DEI, talking about what's happening from a pre-leasing standpoint. We're also going to be touching a little bit on an organization that's helping with HBCUs and their housing. So really excited about everything that we're doing. If you don't know who I am, my name is Wesley Dees. I am the CEO of Student Housing Insight. And if you don't know what Student Housing Insight is, where have you been? Student Housing Insight is actually a podcast that I started probably almost 6 years ago now, and has just kind of evolved into kind of being a platform for everything student housing, especially off-campus student housing is concerned. So a couple of things I just want to, from a housekeeping standpoint, I just want to go over with everybody. One, if you want to chat, obviously some of you guys have already found out where to do that. That's over in the right-hand corner. If you've got Q&A for any questions that you want answered from any of our panelists, make sure you click on that Q&A. That helps me see your question a little bit better. If you put it in chat, I may miss it. We want this to be very interactive, so if you actually want to come onto the virtual stage and speak with one of the panelists, you can do that by clicking that request to speak button. And once you do that, you go through a couple of audio and video checks, and then you'll come onto the virtual stage. Well, Dave, I heard you guys had a pretty eventful week last week in Las Vegas.
We did. One of the things on the screen there says we had a record attendance. It was not even close to prior records. It was astounding how many people were there. Great venue. I don't know whether it was a lot of people who were trying to find out what's going on in the market this year. Certainly, I think from the broad conventional multifamily market, a little bit unsettled in terms of looking forward. But one of the things that has occurred now is that a lot of people from the student housing industry come to our annual conference as well. So they come twice. They come to our student housing conference, which actually will be in Vegas again in the fall, but they also come to the annual conference. We had a great meeting with a number of the leaders in student housing. We had a great meeting with them as well. So, some concerns about 2023 overall. Obviously, Fed's super aggressive on raising interest rates over the last year, and maybe a little bit less this year, but it still leads to some level of uncertainty regarding finance more than anything else. I think everybody's positive generally about the industry itself and how we have fared, but the capital market side of it is clearly a little bit unsettled. So let me talk about another thing that's since the last time we were on together, and we've talked about the White House engaging the real estate industry and others regarding housing, and broadly regarding housing. And this kind of started back in November and culminated in the issuance of a White House announcing what they defined as new actions to protect renters and promote rental affordability. Well, why does this matter? I mean, clearly the student housing industry is impacted by that. And there are a number of things that came out of that, which, let's call it, raised some level of concern about the focus of the White House. There is certainly coming out of this some pressure growing for the federal agencies to address housing affordability. And what does that mean by that? There are 7 agencies that were in that White House announcement that are going to have some role in examining, regulating, et cetera, the multifamily industry, and student housing comes under that as well. So it is something we're closely watching and have a little bit of concern. And for instance, FHFA, there was a letter sent out by a number of Democratic, both senators and House of Representative members, asking them to require rent control on all properties financed by Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. And student housing industry certainly uses Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae as a source for financing their properties. That has some pretty significant implications. They did not come out and tell them they had to do that, but there is clearly pressure being exerted on FHFA to do something along those lines. And there's some other dimensions. I don't want to go into that too in depth. If you are a member of NMHC, you can certainly go to our website and look at some of the correspondence and letters that we did, as well as jointly among other real estate trade associations, about some of the actions of the White House and where some of our current concerns are coming. So speaking of rent control, we just mentioned federal level. While there wasn't one enacted, there are a lot of state and local rent control initiatives going on right now. And again, if you own a property in a jurisdiction, be it a local or a state that enacts some form of rent control, student housing will be impacted by that as well. So it's something that we paying close attention. We're working with, again, a lot of other trade associations. We have, led initiatives, specifically like in California, to kind of fight back rent control. This is something that is clearly gaining a lot of attention, and something that, again, NMHC and other real estate trade associations are really focused on pushing back on establishment of rent control. Some other things regarding regulatory and legislative matters. We've talked about this before. Back in the end of 21, there was something called the Corporate Transparency Act that was passed. This is going to require everybody who has an LLC, and I can guarantee you everybody who's listening in, their organizations have utilized LLCs, partnerships as part of the structure for their real estate investing. So that means 100% of the people on the phone, their organizations will be impacted by this. And it says you may have been providing this information to a bank or Freddie or Fannie if you've gotten financing from them, but you're now going to be required to enter all that information into a national database, which goes live January 1 of next year. And as part of that, the FinCEN, which is a part of Treasury, has been issuing some rules that are going to provide the guidance around access, rules, et cetera. They've already finalized one. We provide a lot of comments. They have currently another one, which is who can access a database. That's a rule that's currently out now. And they have another one they still have to issue before this all goes live. So, we'll keep people informed about what this means, but it is something that it's not just going forward, but look at your portfolio, and every single LLC that you currently have will have to be entered in this database. And that there was an estimate in this most recent rule that said there's 30 million LLCs that will have to be entered. One other one, Waters of the United States. This one has been something that is an overreach from our perspective in terms of what EPA is doing. And we actually joined a lawsuit along with a number of others. This has a big impact on development. And again, student housing would be impacted by this new rule that the Biden administration put out and has been around for a number of years as a proposed, but they just are in the process of finalizing this. and a number of organizations are going to be pushing back on that, having filed a lawsuit. And last, about 10 years ago, the Department of Energy established Energy Star, and a number of the firms that you guys have and the properties may have been entered into the Energy Star database, so you can get a sense of where you are regarding energy compliance, et cetera. Well, they're going to update that. The original Energy Star was not very representative of the entire industry. And so we're going to be urging people to participate and enter their information into this update, which will go live in 24 or 25. So with that, I'm going to wrap up, and I'm going to do a shout out to Charlie. Since Charlie, I'm wearing a t-shirt today in your honor, and I know that you've got a collared shirt on. So Charlie and I were in Colorado the week before. He was actually wearing a button-down shirt, and I gave him props for that. But in his honor, I'm actually wearing a t-shirt today. So
I love that. I'm a big business guy, let me tell you. So I'm getting rid of my the tech guy background. So we're
there
good.
You go. Love it.
Good to see you, David.
Good to see you guys. Thanks, Wes. Appreciate opportunity to talk to everybody today.
Thanks, Dave. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
Well, guys, before we move into the College House panel, I do want to just mention an industry event that I know everybody is aware of and is preparing for. April 3rd and 5th will be the 15th annual. You know what? I think that graphic's wrong. I feel like it's the 16th annual Interface Student Housing that's put on by France Media and our friends at Student Housing Business Magazine. If you have not yet looked at the schedule and the folks that are speaking, please go out to their website and take a look at that. Another important announcement that I want to make, and I just put out a file that you can download of this PDF. But the W.Collective is actually presenting an emerging leader scholarship for someone to attend, completely paid, air travel, hotel, everything. If you're a part of the W.Collective and you know about this, fantastic. Make sure you tell other women in the industry, but you can send your application. And I'm sorry, Whitney or Erica, if you're in the chat, maybe you can tell a little bit more about what's actually required for them to submit. But I know there's an email address there for you guys to email those or to submit those entries for. And I'm excited that they are doing that. Well, Charlie, how was January?
I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but I mean, fundamentals continue to be outstanding. I think if you want to go to that first slide so we can look just nationally at pre-leasing and rates as you fire that up, I think it was pre-lease was ahead about 8.5%, which is maintaining that similar velocity. I think the peak was somewhere around 11, but still, between 11 and 8% ahead of last year. And then rates, to kick off the year up roughly about 11% there too, which if you put that in comparison to multifamily, they're trickling down, or conventional apartments in the multifamily sector, excuse me. We're seeing consistent, rent growth across markets. I mean, some are basically full, have a few bed spaces left, but we're very, very pleased, all on this call is at how well things are, properties are performing, even with the complications in the capital market side, which fortunately is a good segue here, because I'm very excited to talk about the impacts of these strong fundamentals with the current interest rate environment, how deals get done, with Casey Schaefer of CBRE and Mark Schindler of Campus Apartments.
Yeah, guys, I'll let, if you guys will really quick, now that we know your names, make a quick introduction and tell us a little bit about your firms, and we'll jump into it.
Mark, go ahead.
Sure. So Mark Schindler, Executive Vice President of Investments with Campus Apartments. We're based in Philadelphia. We have about $2 billion in assets under management, 34 properties. And since we're talking about investments and the investment landscape, today. Just a little bit of background. We sold 5 properties in 2022. We're expecting to sell 5 in 2023. We're actually working with Casey and CBRE on those transactions.
Yep, great. So, good, Mark. My name's Casey Schaefer. As Charlie mentioned, I'm an SVP on the CBRE National Student Housing Team. We're based in Dallas, but cover the country for CB, all things student. We sold 27 assets last year. It was like more than that. We had 27 transactions last year, totaling $1.6 billion in 22. So try to stay active, but grateful to be on.
Well, Casey, I want to kind of start with you here because, as we've talked about for the past several months, and as Charlie just alluded to, we keep, outpacing year over year from a pre-leasing velocity. Obviously, the Northeast is a little bit behind, but everybody else is, way above last year, especially in the tier 1 markets. As a broker, I just wanted to, kind of get your input for our audience. How do you think that may end up relaying as far as transactions that happen this year? Because we typically see a lot of transactions happen in the second half of the year, in Q3 and Q4 after move-in has occurred and, everybody kind of figures out where they're at. How's this early leasing? Do you think that's going to have an impact at all, or are we going to see some of those move into Q2?
Yeah, I don't know about Q2, Wes. So I think short answer is I think the second half of 23 will be much more active than the first half. I think if you look back at 2022, I mean, the numbers are that the first half was a record first half ever in our industry, 6.3 billion in transactions. That's 2 billion more than any first half ever. Okay, so second half, though, once the interest rates began to increase and that started to take a toll on the capital markets and certain expectations, when you exclude the ACC Blackstone transaction, total transactions in the second half was 3.6 billion, which was less than half of the second half in 2021 and a lower second half relative to the last few years. So I think the slowdown is heavily interest rate driven. Easy to say that. Things are going to transact in the coming months. Our team has 22 assets that are under contract or awarded and moving toward contract execution. So things are going to start trading. We're doing our annual market overview call on the 22nd, and we put out a survey in advance of that every year. One of the questions that we asked was, if you're thinking about selling in the near term, when are you contemplating doing that? We kind of gave them spring of this year, fall of this year, spring of next year, or beyond.
Right.
And over 50% of the respondents so far have said fall of 23. So I think you'll see things start to pick up in 23, certainly between now and August at the turn of the academic calendar.
Gotcha. Well, hey, Mark, you and I met up at LeaseCon back in December here in Charlotte, and we talked about, what was all going on, in the months leading up to that from a pre-leasing standpoint. And campus apartments had some phenomenal leasing, and I think some of your managers got you pretty worked up with how quickly everything was getting leased up, and you were changing rates by the hour. I'm just wondering, because everybody has experienced that. I've heard it from several different companies. Just kind of wondering, do you think the industry has left some money on the table with rates?
Yeah. So what I'll say is that I think this year, I think we'd all agree, has been a year like no other. Wes, you and I have been in this industry for 20 plus years, and I can say I've never seen anything like it in terms of the rent growth that we're experiencing. I think in terms of leaving money on the table, I think it's tough. I think you could say, if you asked most owners every year, they feel like there's a few properties where they could have pushed more. I think that this particular year, we could certainly say the same thing, but we're really happy with the rent growth that we've achieved. And so you and I were talking about the portfolio that we actually had listed with CBRE, and those core properties, and that portfolio, our portfolio of core properties, you've got 6 properties, 3,000 beds roughly, that right now is about 76% pre-leased with 15.5% year-over-year rent growth. We think that that'll continue to tick up as we go further into the leasing season. But I think as an industry, I think owners have been patient. I think owners realize that market fundamentals are strong. And so generally speaking, I don't think we've, as an industry, left much money on the table. I think we're doing what we should be doing, and we're taking our time. And as was shared earlier, we're a few points ahead of where we were a year ago, but we're certainly not rushing it at 52% pre-leased.
Gotcha. Charlie, moving over to the floor plan slides here. Anything there that has stood out to yourself or to Casey and Mark?
Yeah, I think, as we continue to discuss, I think we've said this in the last couple of calls about the larger unit types, specifically 5s and 6s. You're seeing a large level a high level of rent growth, and a lot of that due to, again, newer product types, but also that lower renewal rate that is common with the 5s and 6s. But really what gives me a lot of faith, just looking at the data from, a year-over-year context, is primarily your 2s, 3s, and 4s. And again, ticking up to the 5s and 6s, which keeps the theme that we've completely moved past the COVID, the COVID notion that, you need to be in a studio or 1-bedroom. But even if you look at the 1-bedrooms, I mean, $150 or so ahead of last year from an average rate growth perspective is substantial. So I know, as Dave mentioned, affordability and rent control and different things like that are coming into play sooner than we think. But operators across the board are continuing to push. And I think, to Mark's point, they're staying patient. We see a lot of markets across the U.S. that have substantial rent growth that are maybe a few points ahead, given the fact that there may be that pent-up demand that I guess the conventional market saw from a rent growth perspective that is now making its way to the student housing stuff. So I as we look at specifically, at the floor plan level, the 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, all, above 10% on the rent growth side, which are pretty common from a floor plan level, from floor plan perspective across the United States. So
yeah, and I noticed between the deck that you had for last month, 3s, 4s, 5s had both moved up almost 2%, and I think the 6s, of course, we know there's only 6,000 of those, but they had a pretty big jump too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is, this track, this is out of, I think, 750,000 beds. So it shows true year over year. It doesn't include stuff that may have been added after the fact. So it's a good testament to just the strong fundamentals. And I know Casey will talk to this, but it's driven a lot of players outside of, I guess, your core student housing world to take a look. We get people reaching out about information every single day that, hey, I'm a market rate guy and I see all the strong fundamentals in student housing, have money to put to work. So it's pretty remarkable just to see, again, with all the noise going around in the other sectors that are negative, everything seems to be seemingly positive here at student housing.
Well, I'm sure Casey would like for you to share those phone calls with them.
We do.
Casey, Mark, anything with the floor plans that have stood out to you this year that may play a little bit into what's happening on the acquisition side?
I think one thing that Charlie hadn't already touched on, which certainly I think coming out of the COVID world and moving out of that, and the 3s, 4s, and 5s picking up steam. But the 3s in particular is interesting to me. You're almost $200 a bed on average nationally relative to the 2s lower. So I think historically maybe the 3s considered to be less desirable than a 1, 2, or 4. But when you're seeing such substantial rent increases nationally, and folks that may be looking for value may be flocking to those 3s. And I think that's why you see the velocity and the rent growth there, that maybe that floor plan in particular was undervalued over the last few years.
Yeah, I'll just share this, that in Casey knows this very well, that quite often your investment thesis is going to be pretty specific in a particular market. And sometimes you can benefit from macro level data. And sometimes you have to really drill in with real detail. When you look at this slide and you see that 3 bedrooms are less expensive than 4s or 5s or 6s, if you're outside of the space, it's a head scratcher. You would say, well, why would 3s be less? If you're inside of the space, you know that a lot of those 3s are probably older and further from campus. And quite often what you've been seeing lately is higher density units being built closer to campus. And because they're new, they're renting at higher rates. I'm going to give a quick College House plug for a moment and say that what we appreciate about College House is that it doesn't just give us the macro level data that you could get in other places, but you get floor plan specific data for each and every property. And so we can test some of the thesis that we have. We can say, okay, well, what are 4 bedrooms leasing for that are close to campus versus those that are further from campus? We can kind of create our own exercises, extracting the data from College House. But if I'm saying anything, it's that sometimes macro level data, it can be misleading if you don't kind of pull the layers back and see what's behind it.
And to Mark's point, I very much appreciate the plug there. You guys are great over Campus Apartments. As we look at the year over year, getting market specific, as we look at the year over year pre-lease performance from a regional perspective, again, there's all outliers. There's groups that are riding the top. There's people that are bringing it down. And like in the Northeast, for example, Newark, Ithaca, State College, all very, very strong fundamentally. Whereas you look at maybe potentially Syracuse, which is still getting a little bit of rate growth, but with the new devs, it's definitely taking a little bit of toll on the velocity there. In the Midwest, Champaign still strong, roughly about 4% ahead on pre-lease, 4% behind, but they're still getting 8%. The market got to almost 94% next year, so shows some of that patience. And additionally, like West Lafayette, if there is a bed left in that market, it's on average at this current time about 13-14%. I think the peak there was almost 22-23. Same thing with East Lansing, similar. Pre-lease is flat, but your rate growth is roughly around that 9% mark. So just giving some context into the two, for lack of a better word, the two regions with a little bit of a lower number as compared to the Southeast, Southwest. Again, there's good markets, there's bad markets, everything in between, different fundamentals, different situations. So wanted just to make sure to further Mark's point, it's market specific, and the 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms could be completely different if you're in a different market across the U.S.
Well, speaking of markets, and in this month's packet, you've put together this Southeast region highlight. Anything there that you want to point out to folks?
Yeah, I think if you look at, and again from a perspective, the hot region in the United States is the Southeast region, whether it's student, whether it's conventional, anything in between. We're seeing some, crazy outperformance in markets like Knoxville, Fayetteville, Arkansas. Fayetteville, Arkansas is almost 30% ahead and almost 20% rate growth, where 2 years ago, Wes, as you probably know pretty well, that wasn't the case. Additionally, like a Chapel Hill, North Carolina, right? Rates are up significantly because there's just low inventory. So one thing that's really interesting about the Southeast too is from the development perspective. It's about 60% of the pipeline that we're tracking on College House as well. Given the fact that you have more marquee college towns, a little less density in some of your urban areas, like in the Northeast, Midwest. So, and I know Casey and I know Mark, outside of the Ann Arbor deals, that's where the majority of that portfolio you've mentioned is out. And I would imagine, looking at the other projects that Casey as well the other brokers have out to market, it's primarily Southeast focused too.
It's true. I'll add that the Southeast, I would say that 2 of our stronger markets are in the Southeast that we have exposure to in terms of Knoxville, Tennessee, University of Tennessee, and Clemson, Clemson University in South Carolina. And to the supply point that was made, and and just the fact that some of those markets have been a bit undersupplied the last few years. Our property in University of Tennessee goes down as being the only property where we had campouts happening before we opened the doors to start leasing this year. And then, in Clemson, our property in Clemson, that was our leader across the nation in rent growth with 22% rent growth this year. And so I think those markets have historically, I think to the point you made earlier, historically you've had lower barriers to entry for new development in those markets. But I think these last few years, they haven't gotten the supply, whether it be due to the pandemic or rising construction costs, whatever it might be. So I think that combined with the fact that you've had very strong enrollment numbers just creates a great landscape or backdrop for owners being able to drive rents.
Yeah, the 60% number, I think, may be somewhat even misleading because that's where the majority of the enrollment growth is happening as well. I think you look at what multifamily investors were focused on over the last 24 months. They called them smile states. I mean, really the Southeast and kind of up through the Rockies, but that's because that's where so much of the growth was happening. Investors want to be in Florida and Georgia and South Carolina and Texas and everywhere in between because that's where so much of the growth is happening. And Knoxville, Tennessee, the poster child for that. I mean, you had kids camping out for Mark's asset, but the school had grown to such a level they didn't have capacity to house any of their students to the point where they rented out a Holiday Inn to house some of their students. So I think, that's where you see a lot of the growth. And so certainly supply is naturally to follow as rates run in those respective markets.
Well, guys, I want to ask one question. I had a couple more questions I wanted to ask, but we are running out of time. But for Casey and Mark, the audience for Shop Talk is largely folks on the operations side. And, some of them have probably had a lot of experience with selling property, being part of a property that's being disposed. And sometimes, in a lot of cases, I think we've got a lot of folks who this year may be the first time they've ever been part of a property sale. From your vantage point, is there any advice you have for those site managers, those portfolio managers that may be a little bit different this year on how they need to prepare their team and the property for a potential sale?
So I'll share two items that come to mind, just given that we've been selling properties, both last year and this year. And so it's kind of at the front of my mind. I think the first is that, to all the site managers out there, don't be surprised if ownership's goal is not necessarily to get to 100% this year, but is rather to push rates as much as possible while still getting to 95%. Quite often a buyer or a lender will only give credit for 95% occupancy, even if you reached 100. The way that they value it, they'll typically set aside 5% for vacancy. And so I think as a seller, you want to push rate as much as you can and reach that 95% mark. If you get to 97, but your rents aren't quite as high as they could have been, that's when you feel like you left some money on the table. The second thing I'd say is to just take a big exhale and relax when it comes to job security. The new owners will likely value you more because you're the one that's been living in this property, for years and has the history. They want to learn from you. They want to find out about not just the market, but the property. And so I think quite often site managers can get nervous when they hear that their property may be sold, but just understand that, your job is secure and the new owners, they are hopeful that you will stick around. And you might even be able to negotiate a state till closing bonus with your current owners. And so anyway, the power's in your hands and you shouldn't feel otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I mean, look, the reality is so much of the value of an asset is associated or tied to the quality of the site level team. I mean, the manager, their team, regional manager, they make all the difference in the performance of the asset, regardless of what's going on in the market around them. And I think, Mark, you nailed it on the rental growth. We're in this golden era. We called it a sweet spot when we talked about it before, but this golden era of student housing where supply is at a historically low level in 22 and 23 relative to the prior decade. And you've got these fundamentals that are really unprecedented. We talked about it earlier in the call where, Mark, you mentioned you've been doing this 20 years and have never seen rent growth at this level. And it's not just rent growth, but occupancy and leasing velocity as well. So I think, our sector, the student housing sector, is one of the few relative to every other commercial real estate property type that can offer investors pent-up demand, underlying fundamentals with pent-up demand and future rent growth, which is really what's helping push pricing in the face of these higher interest rates. Raising rates for 23 and 24, and then demonstrating that there's continued runway for them to move in 24, 25 is really one of the most influential drivers of value right now. Gotcha.
Well, guys, I wish we had more time, but I have got to get a move on with some of the other segments that we've got. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you guys giving your perspective, because one of the things we wanted to make sure with Shop Talk, even though it's a operations focused monthly webinar, we really wanted to make sure that folks are getting exposure to the folks that are in your field from a brokerage and investment standpoint, and give some of that knowledge. So thank you so much for that.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, brother. Sam, how are you?
I'm doing good. Wes, how about you?
I am doing fantastic. Something that we're doing for Black History Month is we wanted to have a spotlight on HBCUs, and you and I came across each other here in the past few weeks after, I believe it was NBC did a story on you and your organization, and we've got a podcast that we're going to be recording next week that will be out before the end of the month. But I wanted to bring you on to Shop Talk to kind of just spend 5 minutes talking about Student Housing of America and what you guys are doing. So I'll let you make an official introduction of yourself, and I will bring up your slides here.
Great. Thank you. This is a good teaser for the upcoming podcast. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you, Wes, for letting me be here today. I'm happy to talk about Student Housing of America, especially during Black History Month, and talk about the work we're doing with HBCUs. My name is Sam Wiggins, as Wes said, and I'm chairman of Student Housing of America. And we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And we're focused on providing safe and affordable student housing for college students everywhere. But I'm here today to talk about what we're doing with historically Black colleges and universities. We have what we call the H3 initiative, and that's the HBCU, Historically Black Colleges and Universities, Healthy Housing Initiative. And why are we doing this? We're doing this because we do see the value and the importance of HBCUs in our society today. I am a graduate of HBCU. My partner, Sean Wiggins, and our other partner, Chris Chambers. Well, Sean's a graduate of an HBCU. Chris, not so much. He went to Yale University, but I won't hold that against him. I hear it's a good school, but he believes in the mission. And like I said, we see the importance. And over the past few years, HBCUs have had an explosion of enrollment, but that's good news. But due to historical inequities and funding and allocation resources, it's put a strain on their housing capability. So that's where we come in, and going the wrong way, sorry. Let's move that further. So with our mission of providing safe and affordable housing, like I said, as well as creating an environment where students can thrive and learn, we found to be a good match with HBCUs. So how do we do this? Well, we do it through collaboration and partnership. There's an African proverb that says it takes a village. I know everyone's heard of that, it's ad nauseum, but it's really, it takes a village to raise a child. And for us, for our organization, it takes a village to house a student. We're small, but we're agile, and we rely heavily on partnerships. Our primary corporate partner is Emet Capital Management. And through their investment, we're actually able to develop our first property. It's Cadence SUBR in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and it's adjacent to Southern University and HBCU. And Emet has been with us since the beginning, and we have a longstanding commitment for all our future endeavors. We have another recent partnership with a company called Block, and it's a Black-owned business that focuses on container housing. You probably read in the news, I know you did, Wes, about Fisk University coming with an innovative solution to, they need a quick turnaround on, and they use portable housing, container housing. So we adopted that. We want to be able to offer that as part of a flexible housing solution. But on top of the modern and affordable housing, we also want to provide a safe and thriving environment for students where they can achieve and learn. And we do that by offering supportive services like rent protection, positive credit reporting, emergency loans, and also programs that focus on mental health and wellness, safety and security, financial and credit management, and professional development. So we marry these two factors together to create basically like the perfect storm for students. So that's really our mission. And we do it through corporate partnerships, like I said, but we also need funding. We do it through donations and sponsorships. So that's always welcome. So what's the process? Well, we will either contact the HBCU or we'll be contacted by them. And together we work hand in hand to identify either distressed properties near the university, or if we can't find any, property that we can develop property. If we find distressed property, we'll buy it, we'll renovate it, and we'll manage it. If we can't, then hey, we'll develop the housing on the property that the university identifies. And that's flexible. We can do brick and mortar, but we can also do, the modular housing. After that, we layer it with our programs, and then we see how it goes. And sooner or later, the university, nine times out of 10 will come and say, hey, look, we like to take this property. And we're fine with that. We're happy to sell the university the property and move on to the next project. That helps us achieve our goal. And just a quick faces to names. That's me, that's my brother, Sean, and that's Chris Chambers, our general counsel. And if you want to find out more about what we do, or you want to partner with us, or if you want to donate, hey, please visit our website. We're at www.studenthousingamerica.org, or email me, samuel.wiggins@studenthousingamerica.org. And that's all I have. And Wes, hey, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you all for listening.
Well, thanks so much, and I appreciate you spending the time with us today. We'll have a conversation next week that we're going to record both with you and a couple other folks from your organization. So looking forward to that, and looking forward to everybody hearing that down the road.
Me too. I don't want to give away too much today, so just tune in for the next podcast and you get all the good, juicy, and funny stuff.
Well, fantastic. Thanks so much, Samuel. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
You should just see a little button there to eject yourself. We'll go from there. I'm trying to find the right slide I've got to go to next. Let's see here. I'll get it started here in just a second, guys. Well, the other topic that we've got today is DEI, and I can go ahead and tell you that we're probably going to go a little bit over, especially if we have great questions that come in the chat. If you do have questions that you want to ask, again, I ask you to put that in under the Q&A part versus the chat area, so I can find that easily. But when I met with the leadership committee for Shop Talk last month, or 2 months ago, actually, when we were talking about what to do for February, DEI was kind of top and center of what everybody wanted to talk about, because over the past 2-3 years, a lot of organizations within our industry have put forth DEI strategy. And some folks, quite honestly, within that leadership group said, I don't know if we did everything the right way. And it would be really good to find out how, everyone else is approaching it and things that they've learned. And thanks to Sly Brandon with Cardinal Group, who's also on our leadership committee, he actually referred me to Jason Thompson, who's the author of Diversity and Inclusion Matters. And I'll put up a little link here in just a second to his book out on Amazon. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and have the panel introduce themselves. And Ashley, I think we start with you.
Sounds great. Wes, are you able to hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Perfect. Well, hello, everyone. I see a Peak person in the chat, so it's good to know there's some Peak people here with us today. My name is Ashley Poyer. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Peak Made Real Estate. I also have the privilege of serving as the chair for Peak's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council, lovingly referred to as Peak Link. So if you follow us on social, most recently you've seen episode 1 of our Black History Month series that we just posted of our roundtable. If not, check us out. We're really excited about that series getting underway. And I think, Wes, in the outline, you had asked us to share just a little bit about how we've approached DE&I at our organizations. So I'm happy to dive deeper into that in the discussion. But high level, we launched our council in 2020, like many of the organizations that have joined us today. We have been primarily focused on education and have moved our priorities now into continuing that education piece for all of our associates, but also benchmarking and the data collection side of all things DE&I, which I'm happy to share more with if anyone has any questions on that.
Great. Sophie?
Hello, I'm Sophie Lopez, Director of Employee Relations for Cardinal Group. I'm also the co-chair for our DE&I Council. At Cardinal, we have rolled out quite a few BRGs focused on working moms, on women, veterans, spectrum, and we do plan on rolling out more this year. Our approach is really, we've left it up to our team members to tell us what their needs are, what they want us to focus on, and our groups are extremely active. We've managed to give them budgets each year so that they can host events, they can get speakers to come in, and we've tied our initiatives to our OKRs just to make sure that we're all aligned to the goals that we want to accomplish as part of Cardinal's mission.
Fantastic. Well, Jason, I'll move on to you, and I've got your slides here. I'll kind of go through them. Sure. I think I've got them all in the order that you had them.
Yeah, appreciate that. I'm Jason Thompson, Vice President for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at Western Governors University. I also obviously wrote the book, Diversity Inclusion Matters, and I'm co-founder of a company called CAPE Inclusion. Essentially, what I found is many programs, they start in the middle. And so that's been the challenge. So over the years, that's why I wrote the book. It's just lessons learned through different experiences and launching diversity programs in several different industries. I launched a diversity program for the Olympic Committee, Techstars, Western Governors University, Integris Health. So quite a bit of background in diversity, about 30 years actually. And then just we can go to the next slide here. One of the things that I've worked on is there should be a way to do diversity. What I find is a lot of times organizations have struggled. So, and I apologize in advance, this isn't just promotion of the book, but I put the techniques into a thing that I just basically called CAPE. And what I found is most people don't collect the data. So the first step is you need to collect the data, then you need to analyze it, then you build your plan, and then you execute your plan. What I find is most people think, oh, we need a diversity program. Let's start with the plan. And so I'm going to highlight just real quickly some of the big mistakes I see in the diversity space. And on this next slide here, you'll see it just real quickly. I'll go through these. And I think most people will be able to relate to this, or if you're starting your program, this is an easy way for you to hopefully get started. Number one, the mistake I see, people don't know what data they have or if they're even collecting it. And what I mean that, are you collecting race? Are you collecting gender? Are you collecting LGBTQ? And that's the good place to start. Actually, not with the plan. Start by knowing what data you have. Then you know where you started. Then you build a plan. So the second mistake I hear all the time is that people start with a plan. And I recently consulted with an organization, and the first thing she said to me was, we built this plan, and we're focusing on recruitment. And my take was, how do you know you have a recruitment problem? You need to actually collect the data. And in fact, they didn't have a recruitment problem. People were applying for the jobs. They weren't being hired. They had selection bias. And those are two different things. And so that's why it's important that you know what data you actually have. Don't start with the plan, because you need to know what the problem is. The plan is actually a response to what are you trying to achieve and what challenges do you have? And then the last thing that I see all the time, which again, these things are super fundamental, is a lot of times people think, well, everyone knows what diversity is, everyone knows what equity is and inclusion, so they never take the time to define it. That creates problems later because you'll have some people thinking, well, I thought our diversity was focusing on gender. Another group thinks it's race. And if you just started with, well, here's how we're going to define diversity, here's what we mean by equity, here's how we define inclusion, you can actually be a lot farther ahead, because what I find is usually, like I say, people start with a plan. They haven't taken the time to collect the data. They haven't done the fundamental piece of what do we mean by diversity? And so it's really important. Like these 3 tips will get you started in a better way, or even if you've already started and it's not moving and you feel stuck, if you just pause for a moment and just say, do we have the right data and how are we organizing it? Have we taken time to define these things? You'll start to get better traction, even on existing programs I've found.
Well, great. Yeah, one of the things I really appreciated from your book was, it's not necessarily diversity that you start with. If you start with inclusion, you'll get to diversity. Exactly. And so, it was great. It's been great talking to you over the past couple of weeks in preparing for this. And yeah, the one thing that everybody was wanting to know is just, okay, what are the problems that Jason commonly sees? And this is a great little list here.
And just real quick, Wes, I think that's a great point. I always tell people diversity is actually the outcome of managing who gets hired, who gets promoted, and how long they stay.
Yeah.
And so they struggle because they've started in the wrong place.
Yeah. Well, I want to first move over to Ashley and talk a little bit. Ashley, you'd mentioned in our prelim meeting that obviously you wish you had Jonathan's book before you guys got started, but yeah, what's that process been like for you guys, and what has surprised you most during that process?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have since ordered Jason's book. If anyone is interested in doing a book club, let me know. I would love to read it outside of our organization. I think that'd be cool. I think basically everything Jason said that could be an unintentional misstep is, things that Peak has experienced, where we all had the best of intentions. We were all super motivated when we got, the guidance and were asked by our executive committee to form this council and do this really important work. We were super excited, and there was just a lot of things to do. We had a lot of ideas and everybody was super energized. But we kind of did what Jason was describing, where we started in the middle. The good news is we quickly realized that is where we started, and kind of hit pause and reprioritize our efforts to focus on gathering data and getting a better understanding of where we are today, establishing some benchmarks so that we can set meaningful, measurable goals on how we will know if we have addressed inclusion and equity, and if the outcome of diversity is working the way that we had hoped it would, and we're making the impact that we hoped we would. So I'd be happy to go deeper on any of those topics. I know time is not on our side, but one piece of advice that I would just give anyone who is looking to either bolster up their efforts or start efforts at their organization is to just make sure everybody in leadership positions is really clear on the expectations of the organization once you make this commitment. This is not a bell that you can unring. And your associates are going to have expectations of you if you're bold enough to say diversity, equity, and inclusion is a priority for the organization. And hopefully they will do their part in holding everybody accountable on the leadership team. So, just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page with what that commitment means, and get really specific. So when you talk about gender inclusion, are we talking about just women? Or are we talking about non-binary associates? Because all of that matters. And I think, people sometimes are a little hesitant that aren't as comfortable discussing things in this space. They might hesitate to ask questions. So if you're in a position where you are comfortable with these topics, lead those conversations and be really transparent, give people plenty of opportunity to really understand the scope of what you are trying to accomplish, and ask a lot of questions so that you end up rowing in the same direction.
Great. Sophie, in our prelim meeting, and I've got the most important question for you because it's about money. And we got on an interesting conversation about geography and how that plays into payroll equity. And if you could just share a little bit about that and what companies should be considering when evaluating that.
Yeah. For any type of robust compensation strategy, you should always understand your current workforce. Understand whether or not you have pay equity across your organization in general. But when you're taking into consideration other geographical locations, especially if you're geographically diverse, like Cardinal is, you definitely want to leverage salary surveys, which will be a compilation of data of other organizations. And you'll be most interested in organizations of like size of your own and same type of industry. Taking a look at that and see what the market is paying in those locations for those specific jobs. Other things that you'll take into consideration is cost of living data. It's not used as commonly as market, as salary surveys, but it's really good if you can use both of those together. Take into consideration inflation. As we know, we're going through that right now, and inflation will also impact what the market is going to pay for certain roles. And other organizations like my own, we also use employment and unemployment data. Right now, the market is very tight. Some of the lowest unemployment rates we've seen pretty much ever. So that will also impact what the organization has available to you. So once you have all of those data sets, then begin to look across your organization and see what pay equity looks like. Data shows that Black women, Latino women, Hispanic women are usually paid a lot less than their counterparts of who are not of color. So you want to make sure that you are creating equity in your organization. That's one of the things that has been a top initiative for Cardinal Group. It's something that we constantly talk about in our BRG meetings, and making sure that you have transparency in that process. Put policies in place of how you review your compensation, whether you're doing it annually, which is what I recommend, and what your strategy is for cost of living adjustments, pay for performance. All of that information should be readily available for your team members.
Fantastic. So, and again, I encourage you, if you've got any questions for the panel, please put them in the Q&A and we'll try to get to them. I did go out to LinkedIn in preparing for this and ask everybody, hey, if you've got a question, submit it to us. I'd like to get those in advance. And this one, I think, was probably the most important, and I'll move our pictures here in a minute, but for the panel, can you speak to the overall value of representation and the makeup of the on-site team and how that potential diversity affects the health of an apartment community? So who wants to take the first stab at that?
I'd be happy to jump in. So we every year at Peak complete a customer focus group, and I don't think that the results specifically on the team that they want to interact with will surprise you, but this continues to become more important. The representation on the team outside of just race and gender, so including ableism, other factors and other kind of diverse backgrounds, really helps to make sure that the team is reflective of the community around you. And that's outside of your apartment community, the broader university, the markets that you're in, the cities that you're in. You know, our customers really want to see themselves reflected in the team members that they work with. And that's really at most businesses. So, you know, we're not immune to that. I do also want to make sure we all know that the diversity of thought is just as important as other types of representation. So, you know, if you have any questions or have found a great way to make sure that your on-site teams really represent the communities that they're in, I would love to hear more. But I'd also love to share what Peak has been doing.
Well, and can you explain a little bit by what you mean by expression of thought and diversity in thought? Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think in all teams, whether it's, you know, a corporate team or even an on-site team, the group think mentality can be really dangerous. You know, it can also help create or expand bias and unconscious bias that might be in the workplace between the associates themselves, but also what customers might experience. Just as an easy example, if I am a college student touring a community, I probably am going to feel more comfortable if it's getting dark outside to tour with a woman. If the whole team is all men, that really eliminates that. And it's just about creating environments where every single customer can come in and find someone to connect with and feel really comfortable right out of the gate. First of all, it's going to create a better experience for all of our customers. It's also going to make or create environments for our associates to learn from each other instead of just kind of circulate the same group think around the team.
Sophie, I know you don't come from the operations background, but obviously you've been involved with Cardinal for a little bit, and I'm sure this has come up as well. Any thoughts to how to answer this?
Yeah, I definitely echo everything that Ashley has stated. And this is something that anytime we acquire a new property, we make sure that our team members who will be working at those properties, that they represent that community. They look like that community. They are aware of the social norms and values of that community. And we have found that when that does not happen, we have a lot more issues. We have issues where team members are unable to connect with their residents. They may not have empathy for some of the same issues that those residents are facing. And they just may have a difficult time overall in managing the community, understanding the community, and being great representation of the company. So we always try to recruit from the area or folks who have an understanding of the community in general and can really add value.
Great. I'm going to go to a couple of other questions that we've got here. And Jason, I'd love for you to answer this next one. I think it's really kind of meant for you. Is not having a DEI committee for your company a liability?
Actually, it's not either or. What I find is you have to decide what can the committee actually do. Usually when I find people struggle is, number one, they create a committee and they create goals that they can't actually achieve. So a lot of times what happens is they might think, oh, we need to have more diversity in marketing. Well, are you empowered to actually make that decision? And so what happens is it actually can create frustration if you don't actually create a committee and think about what are the decisions this committee can actually make. And so you can actually set realistic expectations. So in my mind, it's not so much should you or shouldn't you have a committee. It's how did you create that committee? Are they fully empowered to actually make the decisions you think they can? Because in some cases, it might be you actually need to hire a person. In other cases, a committee might work, but you have to go in with the reality of knowing these people also been hired to do something else. So this is actually, it might be more of a passion project. And what usually happens is, well, I'm kind of busy. I'm not going to do the diversity thing right now. And which was the right decision to make because that's not what they were hired to do. And so that's, again, you've got to just take a moment and decide, okay, why are we creating this committee? What can it actually achieve? And are we empowering the committee to actually do that and resourcing them accordingly? So it's not so much should we or shouldn't we, it's how are we going to do a committee if we choose a committee. And in some cases, what I found is I always joke, I got my last 3 jobs because they had a diversity committee and realized they couldn't do the work. They had to hire somebody. And so it's just taking that time to think about how are we going to create this and what are they actually going to be tasked to do and can they actually achieve it?
Great. Ashley, how was that a piece of information you wish you really had a couple years ago?
Absolutely. When Peak founded Peak Link, our committee or our council, I actually was having a conversation with some of our chief people officer and COO and SVP of operations about this yesterday. We kind of felt deputized to really say, here's where we should focus our priorities and invest our dollars. That we quickly realized that was not the case. And I don't necessarily think that's how it should have been, but those are questions that I wish we would have asked earlier. What is our scope? What are our company's strategies and overall goals, and how can our diversity, equity, and inclusion work support those goals so that it's aligned to something bigger? Because I think when it's something standalone, it's so easy, to Jason's point, to put that off to the side because everybody else has day jobs. This is not even my day job, but it's now been made very clear to me that this is an organizational priority. and just as important as, the leasing success of our assets. And, I think understanding what that reach meant and what we did not have the authority to make decisions on would have probably been more efficient for us in the beginning. But I don't want that to be discouraging to anybody, because the good news is you can always course correct. And so those are the conversations that post-launch we've been having. We now have the right information. We're doing the work similar to what Sophie said around just collecting data on a lot of different data points, including pay equity, that we probably should have started with, but it's never too late to kind of turn the ship around and get back on track.
Gotcha. I've got one more question. I know we're past the top of the hour, but I feel like this is a pretty important one, especially for Sophie and Ashley. If you can chime in on this, how do you find passion in DEI when sometimes you may face the rejection of DEI ideas that could help with compliance?
I would say for Cardinal, one of the things that we were able to do is to connect with our leadership and show all of the benefits that come from it. And when you're able to connect that to the business and show how diversity helps drive the business towards success, then the conversation is ready to happen. You've piqued the interest of your leaders, of your board, and then connecting that to engagement for our team members. So finding that commonality for everyone, that's that space of interest, which will connect everyone, is where we were able to do that. Diversity in thought, diversity in representation, brings diversity and innovation to the organization. And all of this greatness and ideas and the conversation has proven to be successful for many organizations. And we were able to show those data points.
Jason, any input on that?
Just real quick. I think one of the things too is I can sense kind of the frustration from the question, and I get this all the time. Yeah. And what I would suggest is what happens sometimes is people are setting unrealistic expectations. So for example, theoretically, your leadership team should be more diverse, but that only happens if you have high turnover, and nobody wants high turnover. So the leader of any organization, her job is keep good people. If she's really good at keeping good people, if the leadership team doesn't become more diverse and everyone's frustrated. And I'm like, well, that's because you set unrealistic expectation. You don't want high turnover. If you don't have high turnover, the leadership team pretty much looks the same way 2 or 3 years in a row. It doesn't mean the organization is not committed. It means you set a goal you can't actually achieve, right? You have this unrealistic expectation. And that's like a major theme I talk about in the book is like, okay, collect the data so you can actually set goals that are achievable. You're less frustrated because you actually know what it is you're empowered to do and what you can't do. You've set goals you can actually achieve, and you understand the levers that you actually can control. And that's why diversity is the outcome of managing inclusion and equity. It's not the goal, because when it becomes a goal, they set goals they can't actually achieve. You have to understand the levers.
Have you seen any situation where maybe too much control was given to that group, where that ended up being a bad thing for any reason?
Usually what I find is the committee thinks they have more control than they do. And that's the frustration is they really think, oh, we're going to impact hiring, but they actually don't make hiring decisions. And so usually that's where the frustration comes. Rarely do they have the authority they think they do. Like I've never really seen a company that empowered the diversity committee to do all the things they think they can do when people show up, because they're so excited. And Ashley talked about this, right? You want to save the world and you do all these things, but you're generally not empowered to do it. So that's rarely the outcome. Usually it's you can't make that decision, and that's why they're frustrated with it.
Great. Well, guys, we've gone a few minutes past, and I appreciate the extra time that you gave us. And for everybody that's still with us in the audience, we will have this probably up in the next 24 to 48 hours on our website at shoptalk.info. So you can go there, you can send it to your friends. It'll also be up on our YouTube channel at Student Housing Insight at Student Housing Insights YouTube channel. So you can also take a look for it there. The next Shop Talk is going to be Thursday, March 9th. And one of the main things we're talking about is going to be supply chain. So if you're wondering if you're going to get all of the things for turn that you need this summer, you definitely want to tune in for that. And again, please share Shop Talk with your colleagues. Again, they can go to shoptalk.info and click on the registration button and get all of the calendar invites for the meetings and all that good stuff. Guys, thanks so much, and I hope to talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone.